Hello, and welcome to Jason Cavness Experience. I'm your host, Jason Cavness. The Jason Cavness Experience is brought to you by Cavness HR. At Cavness HR, we deliver HR to companies with 49 or fewer people across the United States. Cavness HR, focus on your business. We've got your HR. Our guest today is Danny Noall. Danny, are you ready to be great today?
Absolutely.
Danny was born and raised in Cache Valley. He married his wife, Britt, in 2012. He completed his master's in business administration at the Huntsman School of Business at Utah State in 2015. While in the MBA program, one of the projects was to create a business idea and business plan to launch a new product. From that, the Infuze Hydration was started. Since then, Danny has worked in sales and recruiting, has been the executive director for a nonprofit, developed and patented a new technology, has been awarded a military contract, and sold 30 units in the first 12 months of business, gained and lost 40 pounds, lost all of his hair, and still finds enough time to play with his 4 kids under 5 years old. Danny, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. We've actually sold 30,000 units over the past year. But I'm excited to be able to talk to you guys, just to talk to you a little bit today, Jason, and tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Infuze. And what we're kind of our culture and company that we've built. So just to give you a brief background, Infuze, like you said, here was a project company that I started in my MBA course. And what it is we developed a system that allows you to add flavor or electrolytes directly into your water while you're drinking it without contaminating the reservoir itself. So this system right here, this is our vessel. You've got a cartridge that's in the lid that holds your flavor, and that just plugs right in. You've got pure water in the bottom, and then you can turn this dial on or off. So I can go over to the side and have pure water, turn the dial, and in comes flavor, electrolytes, caffeine, whiskey, whatever you need to get through the day. We've also got a hydration pack version of this, and that was actually the first product that I thought of while I was backpacking and suffering from dehydration, and had this great idea like, hey, let's dump in this Kool-Aid so that I can have a little bit of flavor to this water that tastes like mud. And that was great for the first 20 ounces, but then I had 100 ounces of fruit punch, which was nowhere near as appetizing as it sounded. And then the pack itself was stained red and tasted like cherry fruit punch for the rest of its existence. And on our way out of this hike, we were talking about like, hey, there's got to be a way that you could just add flavor without contaminating the whole pack. And so that was the initial idea. That's also where the military has come in and has seen such a great use for our product, because they deal with dehydration on a daily basis, and it's serious to them. I didn't know this, but a military or a Department of Defense personnel, medic, they view dehydration as serious as a gunshot wound. They actually classify it as a casualty if someone goes down with heat stroke or just cramps and dehydration, because they have to evac and all these other things. And so our product, we increase water intake by over 250% when someone uses our system, just because it's a little bit of taste, a little bit of flavor. You're also getting those electrolytes. So we're solving dehydration due to water intake. We're getting more of it in there for them. And then lack of absorption. We're solving that by providing the electrolytes so your body's actually using that hydration as you need it. So that's, kind of in a nutshell what the business is. We've built the company over the past 5 years. The first 3 years was me by myself and some engineers working around the clock to develop this system. And it was way more difficult than I ever thought it was going to be. And the reason was there's a physics issue we had to overcome to make the liquids mix when they're supposed to, but not leak all over the place. And that took about 2 years to just get that product finished up. And then we officially went full time with my full team. We have a team now of 5 people, and then 6 other full-time assembly workers. But we went full time 2 years ago today, actually. 2 years ago on May 1st was day one.
Congrats.
For the whole, yeah, I didn't even realize it was the anniversary, but in that past 2 years, we spent, the first 6 months kind of in prep. We officially launched in March of 2019. And we had a goal to do $1 million in sales our first year. We did, we came a little short. We did 900,000 in our first 12 months, but we made up for it in the following month. We broke that $1 million mark within 13 months of sales. And we're having a record month. We had a record month in April, and we're really excited to see what we can do, for the rest of 2020, regardless of what the current economic and pandemic situation is. The company as a whole seems to be, we're really close to that stabilizing and profitable point as a startup, which is both exciting and terrifying at the same time. So that's a little bit about our company. Some of the initiatives that we do have coming up that, might be of interest to other people is we've always had the term Infuze Your Life as our kind of hashtag. And what that means is just enhance your life. We view what we do to hydration and water as enhancing and taking water to the next level. And so the culture of infusing your life, we have really got behind and built a whole marketing and cultural campaign around this. We've got an app that's coming out here in the next few weeks that will help people infuse their life daily by, one, setting some goals and helping keep track and achieve those goals. Two, track their water and fitness intake. And then the third piece of it is we're actually going to be doing competitions and monthly giveaways of, $3,000 to $5,000 trips and prizes every month that people can win just by signing in. And kind of the reason for this is we are bringing the brand and the impact of what the brand can have to the life of our customers. Instead of just saying, hey, drink some water, it tastes good. We're saying, this is why our product is amazing. It's going to change your life, and it's going to do it in other ways than just keeping you healthy. It's going to take everything you're doing, hopefully, to that next level a little bit. So we're excited for what we can do. And obviously culture and HR all come into play in a bigger way than I ever realized going through, school, or even those first few years starting it up when there wasn't a business. It was just an idea. Now, as we've gotten to experience, a full 2 years of personnel, also a full year of growth, which we've grown on average 35% per month. It's really highlighted our weaknesses and areas where we needed the most help. And so it's been interesting.
Danny, where do you make your product at?
So we make 99% of our parts right here in our own shop. That wasn't on purpose. We wanted to OEM and outsource all of them that we could, but the technology required very specific and precise parts that we had to make to our own specifications. And then because we were so small, we couldn't afford huge, inventory purchases. The product needed to be tested. And so it was actually cheaper for us to bring in the manufacturing ourselves. So we brought in injection mold presses for our plastic parts. We built the molds. And so every plastic part we make in our back shop. We have 2 presses that run 24 hours a day. And then we have about 22 molds that we use to make the 60 separate pieces that create both of our systems.
So, Dan, you talk a little about how COVID-19 has been affecting you. How has it affected you, if any?
It's been really interesting. It's obviously something that's on our mind every single day. From a sales perspective, our online sales have done really well. We've had, people are at home more. There's still money in the economy, so people are still purchasing. I think where it's going to get scary is if this continues for another month or two and that money starts to run out. People aren't going to be making the same kind of purchases that they are when they're fully employed. The impact that's been negative has been on our B2B and retail sales. We were gearing up for a really big promotional item season. And then this the spring feeds into fall for us. So for Christmas, I think we're going to feel some impact on that. But from an overall functional standpoint, our sales have grown. But channel-wise, retail, B2B, and even our military sales have really been kind of downplayed or completely turned off for a little while until things stabilize.
So Dan, do you mainly sell this as an e-commerce on Amazon, or how do you push this out? What distribution channels do you use?
Right now it's 90% e-commerce. We had about 10% that was B2B that's gone, but that'll come back. But we did that on purpose so that we could get through all the product iterations. There's a lot of tweaks and changes we've made over the past year to make the product more stable, easier to use. Not big changes, literally, thousandths of an inch changes on parts to make them seal a little bit better, or we've added an extra O-ring to a part so that it seals better. And then a lot of it's been on quality control and process to make sure that the system's coming out more consistent. And so in the 30,000 units, we've learned a lot, and we're ready. We've decided with our feedback and everything, that we were ready to start going into that retail the first of this year, but that hasn't quite materialized with everything that's happened. So e-commerce almost completely.
So Danny, when someone decides to start a business, most people realize it's going to be, the smart ones realize it's going to be a long haul, it's a physical challenge, long hours. But I think a lot of people underestimate the mental challenge it is, right? The mental strain it puts on you, right? Can you talk about the mental strain it puts on people as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's an understatement. I think when I was starting it, I was naive. Everyone that starts a business, I think, gratefully is naive, because if we fully understood what it was going to take, maybe we wouldn't have done it. But in 2015, when I started, I was coming right out of school. I had to juggle 3 to 4 jobs for those first 3 years. I founded a bakery at the same time with a partner, my same partner that's here with me, and then one other friend of ours. And that was, in the hustle of things to try to grow our just cash flow to keep the business afloat. We needed other jobs to support me and my family. That was hard. Not just working one job, not just working on our product or project or our company 80 hours a week. I was working probably 50 hours a week on Infuze on average, and then another 50 hours a week easily on my other jobs to pay my bills. I literally remember getting done at the bakery. The company was called Baked, and we'd finished up at Baked at midnight. I got in the car and had to drive 2 hours one way to drop one of our injection molds off to one of our suppliers so they could do some tests on it. And then I had to drive home. So it's a 4-hour round trip. I got home, 4 a.m. I literally had to be up at 7 a.m. to get things started for the bakery. And that was my pretty consistently, I'd work something like that 2 or 3 days a week. I pulled an all-nighter once a week, at least, for projects, investor pitches, anything that we were preparing for 3 years. And so that mentally was really hard. And then we kind of stabilized. And I think the hardest thing that's been, the thing that's been the hardest for me to keep up with is that, and comprehend, is that things don't ever really get easier. We just get a little bit better at handling what the current situation is, but things always progressively change and get harder. So where we've had, we'd have something happen where 1 month, we'd have to raise money and we'd be right at the very breaking point, but somehow we'd pull it off. And I would think, wow, things just can't get any worse than that was. And then, 6 months later, we have a part fell and our return rate's 20% for a month, and we're bleeding money. And the investors are tired of the process, and I'm tired of the process, but I have to make sure I'm keeping a positive outlook and keeping everybody going. That gets hard. You feel very alone in some of those situations, even though you're not, right? Like my partners, they're with me every single day. They're going through these same issues. I could not do it without them. And from a mental standpoint and from a workload standpoint, I couldn't possibly do it by myself. But mentally you feel alone. And I think the only thing that's really helped me on that is I have the confidence in the product, right? We've done all of our analysis. We've done all of our research. We know that it can work. And I know that we have the right team to be able to make it work. I've had to really just be patient with myself, temper my expectations a little bit, and really try to keep a middle ground emotional state. Never get too high, never get too low on what we're going through. If that answers your question.
Yes, it does. And I think people realize entrepreneur, sometimes it's harder, there's so many valleys, so many highs. You got to use your balance, like, okay, yeah, I just lost this, big contract,
yeah,
the business is going to fail. Well, it's probably not going to fail, right? Or vice versa. Man, this investor invests a lot of money in me. We're going to take off. Well, maybe you're not going to take off, right?
It costs more than takes longer. Everyone says that. I didn't fully comprehend what it meant. I still don't. Like, I'm still learning what stabilizing means. It takes longer than you think. And honestly, it's okay. Like, if I would have had, we've had to invest about $2 million into this company to get it going. And I have that thought sometimes, like, oh, if I'd have just had the $2 million that first 6 months, we'd be so much further down the road. And in reality, I don't think that that's true. I think that the money has come when we've been ready for it. And that's been very critical for us to grow, because had we have had that funding right at the beginning, we probably would have wasted it. We probably wouldn't have had the understanding that we've gained on how to be successful with it. It would have just been, it would have been an ace that we played our first hand instead of holding it until the time was right, kind of thing.
I know what you mean, because like my first years as my company, I wasted so much money like doing stuff that was ahead of the game. Right, I paid for a sales platform. I wasn't ready for sales. I imagine I would have like a $2 million invested. I would have wasted on stuff I wasn't ready for yet.
Oh, and it seemed so smart at the time. Like, you convince yourself, like, oh, I definitely should buy merchandise and have T-shirts and hats, because we don't have a product, but we have a cool brand. So let's make a brand. And that, I still have some of those shirts from 5 years ago that just we never did anything with them, because I ordered too many of the extra smalls instead of the extra. It's like these silly things that you just don't know, and someone can tell you, but like, until you've made the purchase order and realized, like, oh gosh, I screwed that up. Like, you can't quite comprehend what it means.
Yeah. Or like, you got like throw some of your old accounting stuff you've done, like where you pay for, like, I paid how much for what?
Oh,
what was I thinking?
Yeah, it's depressing. And it's just like, well, I guess the only thing that's positive is that we're not still paying for that marketing firm that we were paying $1,000 a week to do what were they doing?
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's been interesting for sure, but it's also been things that at the time, like, it seemed like the right choice. And I talked to my investor, I talked to my advisors. We would make the choices together, but every business is so different from one another. It's like, you have to evaluate it for that set business for every decision. And you just don't know till you experience a little bit more.
So let's talk about advisor for a minute. So my point of view is that, like, you can have a board of advisors or people mentor you, whatever, but it's all on the lens, right? They don't know what you're going through. And some advice, I think they mean good and the intents are good, but sometimes they unintentionally give you bad advice. What has been your experience with that?
Oh, that's I'll tell you two stories. One was an advisor, who wanted to be a partner, and he was someone that wasn't willing to help me for free to begin with. He wanted to negotiate, like, before he gave me any advice, equity. And it wasn't a little piece of equity. Like, it was a big piece of the company. And I was this was my first 3 or 4 months. Like, I didn't know a dang thing about what I was doing. And I was literally this close to signing a deal where this person would have 30% of the company as my advisor. Every piece of advice that I got from this person cost me money. I never made money. Nothing succeeded of anything that I ever did with him. Now, luckily, he was a good guy. Like, he was just trying to make a good deal. I don't hold it against him at all, but luckily I didn't make the deal. And luckily he is not a part of the company. Contrast that to another person. This individual's name is Jeremy White. He is not a partner. He's never asked me for a penny. I've tried to get him to invest a whole bunch of times, but it's never worked, right? We've never had the right fit. But he has given me advice, friendship, guidance, a sounding board for 3 or 4 years now. And almost every time that advice that he's given me has led me to the right decision. Sometimes it's different than what he tells me I should do. I've had to take what and he's the first one that said, he's like, hey, I'm going to give you this advice, but you know your business better than anyone else. Take it for what it's worth. Remember that I haven't spent hours and hours researching whatever it is that you're presenting to me, and just use it as an evaluation point. And so he's given us some really critical feedback that has shaped my choice, but it's almost never been the exact same thing that he said. And so kind of like as a summary of that, I would say if you're starting up, if you have someone that is trying to pitch their value to you, it's probably not the right person. But if you're able to find somebody that you can sense the value in them and they're willing to work with you for free for a little while to kind of get a feel for how they would fit into your business, that's the kind of person you should be taking advice and mentorship and friendship and partnership from, because the equity side and the advisor side is something that the seed's planted at such an early stage. And if it's not a good seed, you don't know for some time down the road. And if it's the wrong seed, it can break your foundation. It could, it's going to be the wrong tree. It's going to be the wrong, whatever analogy you want to say, it's going to be the wrong thing for your business if you haven't gone down that road a little bit with them.
Yes. So I'm changing the subject a little bit. So on the subject of It's a Small World, so you graduated from Utah State, right?
Yes. Yep.
So my neighbor's son is actually a redshirt freshman on the Utah State football team right now.
There's no better school. Good football coach coming in. It's gonna be a good year if they play this year. So
yeah. Interesting. So talk a little about how you lost your 40 pounds, gained or lost 40 pounds. Was that on purpose?
That was the bakery was the biggest cause for that one. So we launched this bakery, and I was sampling way too many of those cookies, and distress. I didn't take care of myself like I should have. I was taking care of the business. I was taking care of my family, and I was just saying, like, in my mind, like, I don't have time to go work out. I don't have time to do these things. And within a matter of a year, I had gained, probably 30 of that 40 pounds. And then how I lost it, I went to China a year and a half ago, and I was supposed to stay there for a week. I ended up being there for a month by myself, and I had nothing to do other than focus on myself for 3 or 4 days of the week, because our factory would, make a change, and then they'd take some time till I could come back and review whatever sample it was. And so I worked out 3 hours a day and ate really well and spent a lot of time kind of reflecting and changing some habits that I had. And I've kept that off pretty well. I've gained, I think I fluctuate about 10 pounds from that, but I've kept that off since then. So.
Yeah. So I recently did a 14-day water fast. I just finished the 2 weeks of just up my water, and I went from 195 to 173. But of course, like in 6 days, I gained like 7 or back, unfortunately, So
sure, yeah, sure. That's impressive. Yeah, I'm not that committed. I like my pizza. I'd rather just go run 5 miles and eat my pizza. But
I was here on this lockdown, about to grow a second stomach. I was like, man, I got to do something. Right. This is getting out of hand right now.
Yeah, I know. It's a danger for everyone.
So you spent some time as an executive director of a nonprofit. Is there a difference between running a nonprofit and running a quote unquote a regular business?
Conceptually, I've found them to be really similar. And obviously, like my real regular business is still in startup phase, so I don't have that experience from like a stabilized corporate profitable company. But the nonprofit I was running was a company called Rods. It was Racing for Orphans with Down Syndrome. And what they did is they raised adoption grants for Down syndrome orphans around the world. It was amazing company, amazing founder. And we were able to do some pretty cool things while I was in there. And from an operational standpoint, for that nonprofit and a startup, where both of them are resource strapped, it was pretty similar. You know, you had to make things happen when maybe your optimal funding or resources or systems and processes just didn't exist. You had to make those. And I think as a business owner, that is, like, if you're going to sum up what is your job summary and what do you do as a CEO, it's making sure everything flows in the right direction, right? Like, how do you move the wheel line every day? Because if you just take one side of that wheel line and run it through the field, it's going to break apart, right? Like, you have to move every wheel 10 yards at a time to get the whole thing across the field. And I think that's pretty accurate to how the nonprofit was and to what my experience has been so far. Is, you know, one day like yesterday, we were spending half the day on a shipping issue and getting a discount that we were promised and getting it implemented into our software and making sure that our shipments were being optimized. The day before that, we had a part issue that we had to, you know, evaluate some potential part changes, where our leak, you know, where some fail points were at, and cost of goods, and make sure that was all going. And this morning I've spent the whole morning running evaluations and reports for the last month on our marketing. So it's like every day is completely different, but in the end, it's all the same thing. You're moving the piece of the business to the next point and optimizing it and trying to figure out ways to move two at the same time instead of one, and not spend two, you know, not have one part be so over focused that it breaks another piece.
Danny, and I could be wrong about this, but when someone starts a company, they're known as entrepreneur. But when one starts a nonprofit, I don't think they're known as entrepreneur. Why do you think that is? It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd never thought of that, but I mean, honestly, like, from a lot of standpoints, a nonprofit's harder. If times are great, you would think that fundraising was really easy for a nonprofit. But when times are bad, things are really bad for a nonprofit. And I actually have a little insight into this one. So Davis Smith, he's the founder of Cotopaxi. He's a friend of mine. And I've asked him this question before, because I at first we wanted to found Infuze as a B Corp, right? Like a social mission company to provide some sort of benefit to society. And I asked him, I said, hey, what do you think I should do? Like, what cause should I get behind? And he told me something really interesting. He said, you know what? Focus on giving back after you're successful. You have to stabilize as a company before you can contribute back to any organization in a large way, right? Like, we find ways to do community outreach. We find ways to donate. We find ways to get behind things. Like, we partnered up with Operation Underground Railroad, who fight child trafficking, where a purchase of every one of their bottles, which is co-branded with us, goes directly back to them to help provide freedom to these kids, right? Like, that's something we're super passionate about. We love getting behind it. But it's one product. It's not our whole business, because our whole business isn't profitable yet. We can't just dive into contributing in a big way. Now, that being said, from a nonprofit, like, if you have someone that's experienced in running a business more so than me, I think, like, all the nonprofit is just a business that has to operate on less margins than a normal company a lot of times. Yes,
and at least for the startup, you can tell the lie, that you're gonna get equity down the road, right? And you're gonna become a millionaire. There's no such thing as telling a nonprofit employee you're gonna become a millionaire. You gotta really love the cause.
Tell yourself the lie. I at least say, hey, one day this is gonna be worth it because I'm gonna be able to pay my bills and the power won't get shut off this month. But The thing I noticed in the nonprofit world is every one of the, not everyone, like there's obviously some corruption in there, but the vast majority of those people are doing it for the cause and the purpose so much more than they are, for their own gain. But to hire the right kind of talent, those companies still have to be able to pay those people to, at least a market comparison on the job that they're doing. And I was doing it, that was a part-time workload for me. And so it wasn't, full-time compensation, but it was enough it had to be enough to keep me committed to it.
Danny, can you talk some about the process of obtaining a patent?
Yeah. Just kind of from a base level, there's two different kinds of patents. There are design patents, which are fairly easy to get. And then there are utility patents, which are more difficult to get. The design patent, in order for a design patent to be useful, you need, for a product specifically, you need a few of them. You need like for ours, or for our hydro, we have a design patent on our cartridge and a design patent on the system itself. And if you just wanted to kind of define what a design patent is if you were to take a 2D picture of your product, whatever that edge of that 2D picture looks like, that's your patent. You got a shape. You're patenting a shape. A utility patent is a function or a technology that allows a function to happen. And so what we had to do is we had to overcome a siphoning effect between the reservoir and the liquid flavoring that without our patented system, they want to mix back and forth and you cannot stop it. There's by the law of physics, there's no way to stop that siphoning from happening. And so what we created was a mixing system that only activates when you suck, and then it snaps shut when you're done drinking. And that's not that complicated. That's like a one-way valve, right? But the difference on ours is that our whole mixing system moves with your suction. So when you apply suction, it moves forward and it opens up a valve that allows the flavor to come in. And then when you release suction, it snaps shut and prevents it from mixing. That took 3 years for us to get that patent issued. So the first process on design or utility is you file a provisional patent. That you have about a year you have exactly a year to file your actual application. And then once that application goes in, you are on the wait list for the patent office to send you back either an acceptance or a rejection. We were lucky enough to get an acceptance on our first round. A lot of times you have to go through a few iterations of that patent to get it. And then on top of that, there are international patents that you need to be aware of. And you have 30 months from your provisional patent to file your international application. Well, you have 1 year from your provisional to file what's called a PCT retainer. And that gives you 30 months to file in whatever countries you decide to file in. So we just filed in 7 or 8 countries for our hydro system in January. That'll go through the patent process and all of those before we're ever awarded anything for them.
So Danny, is all this common knowledge, or you had to do like a lot of research and digging through files and trying to figure all this stuff out? Or you just had to Google how to do
a lot of it's been Google, a lot of it's been YouTube. A lot of it, honestly, a lot of it's just been industry experience. I had a patent class in my business school that talked about like when I say patent class, I had one class period that was on patents, and so I understood the names, but I didn't understand the processes. And same with engineering, right? Like I didn't have a clue about engineering. I didn't understand what any of those things meant that they would say. And my first design, I took it to our engineer, and he was kind enough not to laugh at me because that system was literally going to defy physics and gravity to work. But I'll tell you, over the past 5 years, I've gotten to the point where I can have a very competent conversation with any engineer around any manufactured product because I've grown to understand what they're saying. And so what I did, and I still do when I go, into a new scenario, a new situation, is I would go in and I'd meet with these investors. I'd go meet with these engineers. I'd go meet with, the patent attorney. And I would just write down every word that they said that I didn't know. There was a lot of them. And then I'd go home and I'd look up that word, and to try to appear like I knew what the heck I was talking about. Next time I'd meet with that person, I'd try to use whatever word they said back to them. So they're like, oh, he was listening. He must have comprehended our full conversation. In reality, I was replaying the conversation, 10 hours later and understanding what they meant then. So,
yes. Dan, you already talked about the sum, but can you talk about why you started your company, or how you started, and what your vision is for your company going into the future?
Yeah. So originally I was going to be a teacher. That was what I did my undergrad in. And the reason was I wanted to impact, these young kids' lives the way that my teachers and coaches had. And, but I also realized that it wasn't going to provide me the freedom and resources to do some other things that I wanted to do. And so I was really torn on what to do, because I thought, like morally and for what I want to do from a life satisfaction point, like teaching could really let me do that. But on an impact side and on the scale that I thought that I wanted to make that impact, I realized it was going to be difficult. And as I was thinking about it, I realized that some of my most influential people I'd ever had in my life had been my bosses, had been my managers, had been even my peers, for good or bad. If I had a good manager, I remember all sorts of things from him. If I had a bad manager, I also remembered all sorts of things. And so I kind of realized that if I could be the kind of person that was a good, caring, and inspirational teacher, I could also be a good, caring, inspirational businessman, manager, leader, partner, whatever you want to say. And so that was kind of my turning point when I realized I really enjoyed business and wanted to go into that. And then from a cultural standpoint, we really only have, I really only have two rules. And we've been talking about this quite a bit with our team lately, is that I trust my team completely. I will not hire them. I won't give them a responsibility unless I trust them to do the job. And so I try to demonstrate my trust to them in any conversation, in any project, in anything that we're working on. I trust them to make the best choice. And if they make the wrong choice, I trust that they'll learn from it and that we as a company can move forward. And so that's rule number one. I trust my people. And rule number two is that I try my very best to not expect anything from them that I'm not willing to do. And so I try to, get in the trenches with them when we need to. I try to go help on assembly when we're running short on a part. I try to come in and run the machines when, if it's a weekend and no one else wants to come in. So I try to do what I expect as obviously as best I can. And then as a team, we've really had some really big leaps and bounds, even though our team as a whole is very inexperienced, right? Like my head of marketing, 22-year-old kid, not even out of college, but he's driven a higher ROI than any marketing agent we've ever been able to hire. My head of operations is my uncle. He left a stable teaching job to come do this with me. And he has solved problems and found solutions to assembly, production, shipping, process problems and issues that we had no idea even existed until we got into this. But we've been able to meddle our way through, and we're getting to that point where we're finally starting to hit our stride in a lot of areas.
Danny, can you talk about your experience with HR as a small business owner?
HR, like I had like one class on HR, right? When I was in business school. And there's, it impacts our daily life in ways that I didn't really understand. When I always knew the value of a human employee. Like I knew that they were bringing to the table intangible and tangible assets. What I think has been the biggest eye-opening experience for me, and kind of ties back into those partners and mentors and advisors and equity plays in the company, is that employees. And so I've had to learn how to communicate a little bit more my expectations, on a project to get the kind of results that I want. And from an HR side, I've learned that personalities are both, one personality may fit really well in sales, but he may not fit well in, assembly. And that's common knowledge. That's not anything new. But I've also come to understand the impact that having a personality in the wrong position can have on the whole culture of the company. We've had to fix a few toxic culture situations over the past 2 years. And, going into those situations, I was always nervous. I didn't want to be confrontational. I didn't want to, lose a friendship or a relationship over it. But once we finally pulled the trigger to solve whatever the issue was, whether it was, someone that was being super difficult to work with, or someone that was, kind of had a martyr syndrome, that was thinking they were doing so much more than someone else. When we solve those problems, that's when the whole company functions and flows the way that it's supposed to. And then the other piece that we've had to learn, and this kind of goes back to the same thing, like we're figuring this out as we go, is having a system in place for how we are going to manage HR situations has been super helpful. The corporate structure of, here's each person's file, and here's, every time they've been written up, and here's all these other things. Like, we're not at that point yet. One day we will be. But right now it's, hey, if I have a problem with someone that's back in the assembly room, like, we send them a text and say, hey, you've been late 3 times this week. Like, what's going on? Or, if we have someone wants a raise, like, they knock on my door and come talk to me, and we openly have a conversation as to why that can work and what it would take to get there, or why we can't do that just yet because we're not to that point yet. And so HR is just as critical as sales. It's just as critical as engineering, maybe even more so, where I need a team to build the brand with me, not people that I can boss around and tell what I want to do for the day.
Yeah, and of course I'm biased, but from my point of view, HR is the only business function that touches every section of your company, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only other piece that I would say does have an impact on all of our other facets would be like the product itself, So, but I think you could just say that HR is the product portion of any business for the employees. If I have a bad HR process, there's no difference between that and having a bad quality control process. It's going to be just as detrimental, if not worse, to the company as a whole.
And I think a lot of small business owners, founders don't get the importance of HR, helping you have a great employer brand, right? Because if your employer brand is bad, you can't recruit people, you're going to lose your people, and HR plays a big part of making sure your employer brand puts its best foot forward and have people stay and bring on great people.
Yeah, absolutely. The success of Infuze has very little to do with me. It has a lot to do with the product, and equally, if not more so, the team that we've built to push that will line forward. It can't happen without them.
So, Danny, I forgot to ask you during our pre-talk, but were you going to have a gift or resource to share with the listeners?
Yeah, if they just want to use the code Cavness for, we'll give them 20% off on anything they want to buy. So you can just go on to infusehydration.com, use the Cavness code at checkout, and it'll give them 20% off on their purchase. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, any of those other places. LinkedIn, we always have some announcements and seasonal giveaways, seasonal products that we're doing. And we'd love to hook anyone up with that stuff.
And speaking of social media, can you share your personal social media and your company so people can reach out to you?
Yeah. So mine's just Danny Noall, DANNYNOALL, on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and then for the Infuze side, everything is Infuze Hydration on all of our platforms. So LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok has gotten kind of big for us the past few months. And so we try to keep things entertaining. We try to provide some value, not just product sales and promotions the whole time. The brand itself has, gained some big traction with that Infuze Your Life side of things. So if you're interested as well in, joining in our Infuze Your Life challenge, getting a chance to win these monthly giveaways and trips, jump on and follow us there. We'll keep everyone up to date on what's going on there.
And for our listeners, we'll have the links to his discount and his social media on the show notes. You can find the show notes at www.cavnesshrblog.com, and be sure to share this episode with your friends and your networks. Danny, we're coming to the end of our talk. Can you give us any advice on anything you want to talk about?
Oh, well, I think the only thing that would be left to be said is that if you think you can do it, you probably can. If you don't think you can do it, you won't do it. And, there's no reason to be afraid of putting there's no reason of being afraid of taking that leap, because even if you fail, if you fell, it's because there wasn't enough people that knew about you and they don't know that you fell. And if you succeed, it looks like you did it overnight, even though it probably took 5 years to get a profit in there. So.
Yep. The good old 5-year overnight success.
That's right.
Hey, Danny, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you for your time as well. Remember to be great every day.